Pitches on the treble staff. Recall that a stave or staff consists of 5 horizontal lines and 4 spaces, each corresponding to a different note on the piano. However, the staff alone does not tell us what these notes are. To assign notes to the lines and spaces, we use a clef. For example, as soon as we place a treble clef on the staff, we get a specific assignment of notes to the lines and spaces. Okay, so here we have a picture of a treble staff, which has a treble clef. Recall that another name for the treble clef is the G clef because of the way this clef curls around the line that corresponds to a G in this clef. Okay, we could see that the second line from the bottom there corresponds to a G. And look how the curly part of the treble clef goes right around that line. Recall that the white keys on the piano keyboard cycle through the notes A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, beginning again at A after each G is reached. Notes on the treble staff, or any staff for that matter, behave similarly. Every time we move upward from a line to a space, or from a space to a line, we change from one letter to the next. For example, the next letter after G is A. Remember that a cycle ends with G, and the next cycle begins with A. Therefore, the space directly above the line corresponding to G corresponds to A. There we see the A in that space directly above the line corresponding to G. Similarly, the line directly above the space corresponding to A corresponds to a B. Now is a great time to pause the video and see if you can fill out the remaining letters on the treble staff yourself. Okay, so we have a C in the space above the B, followed by a D, E, and then F. And then going backwards from the G, we have an F and an E. Let's look at where these notes appear on the piano. Okay, remember how to find the G's by looking at 3 black notes in a row, and between the first 2 of those black notes is always a G, and from that we could label all the G's going up the keyboard from G1 through G7. We're particularly interested in G4, as that's the G corresponding to the second line from the bottom on the treble staff, right? Remember that G4 is written in scientific pitch notation, or SPF. It's the G in the 4th octave. Okay, so F4 is the white key that appears directly to the left of G4, and that corresponds to that space that's directly below the G line on the treble staff. Then going to the left again, we have E4, and on the treble staff, we go down 1. Okay, now starting from the E4, as we go up the staff, we go right along the keyboard. So we have E4, F4, G4, A4, B4, C5. Remember that a new octave always starts at C, D5, E5, and F5. Hopefully, by this point, you have memorized the fact that the treble clef, or G clef, curls around the line corresponding to a G note, right? We've discussed this many times at this point. You should also know how to match that line up with the corresponding note G4 on the piano keyboard, as shown in this picture. From there, you should be able to match up any of the other lines or spaces on the treble staff with the corresponding keyboard notes simply by counting, as we just did previously. Now, if you want to be able to read sheet music fluently, you will eventually need to memorize which note belongs to each space and line. Certain mnemonic devices can be useful for this purpose. For example, It's worth noting that the spaces correspond to notes that spell out the word face. Here they are highlighted in red. And let's get rid of the line so that you can see clearly FACE when you look at all the spaces on the treble staff. The lines aren't quite as straightforward. They spell out EGBDF. Let's highlight those in red and let's get rid of the spaces so that we could just focus on the lines for a moment. It's not a bad idea to create your own mnemonic device to help you remember these letters. A typical one that many people use is every good boy does fine. Notice how the first letter of each word in that sentence corresponds to one of those lines on the staff. I like to use elephants grow bigger during festivals. I recommend taking a few minutes to come up with one of your own. Now, it's important to realize that we never place actual letter names on the staff. Instead, we place the symbols representing specific types of notes, such as whole notes, half notes, and so on. The line or space that the circular part of the note is placed on tells us the pitch, while the type of note tells us the duration. Okay, on this treble staff here, I've now placed several notes. So we have a quarter note, a whole note, a half note, and then a 16th note. Okay, so the leftmost note is a quarter note. It has been placed on the highest space. If we remember the mnemonic face, then we see that this quarter note has a pitch of E. More specifically, the pitch is E5. Similarly, the whole note has a pitch of A4. Using the mnemonic every good boy does fine, we see that the half note has a pitch of B4 and the 16th note has a pitch of G4. And we could see those there on the keyboard. So we see that the lines and spaces on the treble staff allow us to represent pitches between E4 and F5. There are actually two additional pitches that can be represented without any issues. By placing a note just above the F5 line, we can represent the pitch G5. Okay, here we see a G5 and the note that it corresponds to on the piano keyboard. Similarly, by placing a note just below the E4 line, we can represent the pitch D4. Okay, there it is, and the corresponding note on the piano keyboard. What if we want to represent the note C4? We seem to have run out of room on the treble staff. However, we can still do it by using a ledger line. This is a small horizontal line placed above or below the staff, allowing us to represent higher and lower pitches. Okay, here we have a picture of a small ledger line there. We can place a note on a ledger line or in spaces between ledger lines, just like we would place a note on the staff. Okay, so here we have our C4 placed on this ledger line. Now that we know how to represent pitches corresponding to white keys on the piano, it's time to deal with the black keys. We will need to use sharps and flats for this purpose. Sharp and flat symbols are always placed to the left of a note. For example, the note shown on the treble staff here is D♯5. On the piano keyboard, this is the black key highlighted in yellow directly to the right of D5. Remember that this same black key also corresponds to the pitch E♯5. Okay, there's a picture of the note E♯5 on the treble staff, and it corresponds to the same key on the piano keyboard. Once a flat is placed to the left of a note on a line or space, that flat is applied to any other note that appears on that same line or space for the rest of the measure, unless it is deliberately canceled out. For example, when we see the rightmost note on the staff in this picture here, we will still play the same E flat on the piano keyboard, even though there is no flat symbol to the left of that note. The same rule applies to sharps as well. We can cancel out a sharp or flat by using a symbol called a natural. Okay, here we see a picture of what a natural symbol looks like. There it is next to the note on the treble staff. In other words, by placing a natural symbol to the left of a note, we restore the note to its original pitch. When we see the rightmost note on the staff above, we would now play an E5 instead of an E flat 5. Okay, so the leftmost note is an E flat 5 because of the flat symbol, and the rightmost note is now an E5 because of the natural symbol to the left of it. Sharps, flats, and naturals are collectively known as accidentals. Okay, it's time for an exercise. Now is a great time to pause the video, try this exercise yourself, and then resume the video to check your answers against mine. Okay, now I'm going to assume you've tried this exercise. Let's go over it. So once again, we have a portion of Elise, but just the treble staff this time. And first, we want to name each note appearing on the treble staff using scientific pitch notation. Okay, starting from the left, we have E5, then D sharp 5, E5, D sharp 5, E5, B4, D5. Notice how the natural symbol changes the note back to its original pitch of D5. If there was no natural symbol there, it would still be D sharp 5, but the natural symbol makes it D5. C5, A4. Here we have a ledger line that gives us a C4, then E4, A4, B4, E4, G sharp 4, B4, and C5. Okay, for the second one, draw an arrow from each note to the corresponding key on the piano keyboard. Okay, I'm going to do this one at a time so it doesn't get cluttered. I'm just going to draw one arrow at a time. So here we have E5, D sharp 5, E5, D sharp 5, E5, B4, D5, C5, A4, C4, E4, A4, B4, E4, G sharp 4, B4, and C5. Okay, and finally, play each of the notes shown on your piano keyboard. Pay attention to the duration of each note and rest as you play. I'm going to leave this one for you to do. If you're having trouble, then make sure to check out my lesson of Elise, where I walk you through this note by note on the piano.